So Donovan Mitchell's injury was not as bad as we feared it was going to be. He will be back, hopefully in not too long. To me, he's the biggest swing guy in the NBA right now. Because with the Lakers, it's not a guarantee they're going to be healthy. So I think the Western Conference is potentially pretty open. Now, speaking of the Lakers, the Jazz could end up getting them in round one, depending on where they fall in the standings. So that could be a thing. They would prefer not to get the play-in tournament, but they might. Anyway, to think about Donovan Mitchell a bit, I mean, the big thing with him this year is, of course, more threes, right? Shooting threes off the screens if they don't step up on him. Sometimes shooting the three even if they do step up on him. And I think before he got hurt, there was also a big increase in his free throw attempts. There were some games with a lot of free throw attempts, and that's something I've always wanted from him. Just a few more plays of just barreling down to the basket off of a screen rather than the pull-up mid-range or the floaters all the time, even if he's pretty good at all that stuff. And so I would like to believe that's going to keep up when he comes back. And, of course, the main thing with the Jazz this year is the swing offense. Gobert dives, defense has to collapse, start passing the ball around, skip passes, million three-point attempts, all that stuff, right? There's more to it than that, but that's a big thing. And I just feel like in a playoff setting where teams are probably going to switch a little bit more, double team a little bit more, I just want to see how that's going to go. Not to say the Jazz have not had to deal with those things in this regular season, but in the playoffs, it's different, as we all know. Well, in a round one series, assuming it's not the Lakers, the Jazz should win. And, I think about the Spurs. Maybe DeJounte could make Mitchell's life difficult, and Popovich could have some wild zone defense stuff. The Warriors are going to switch a lot, I imagine, and perhaps Draymond would have some crazy performance in a playoff series. I mean, we don't know what the Jazz round one matchup's going to be. I think the scariest team for them would be the Mavs, because Dallas could put 5 shooters out there without sacrificing their defense, because Maxi Kleber can make threes, of course, and I just want to see what that would look like with Gobert having to defend somebody. But for the sake of Mitchell, would Dallas be able to overwhelm him? I mean, if Carlisle busts out some zone defense, maybe, but I mean, Finney-Smith, he's a good defender. I don't think he's the guy who's going to lock up Donovan Mitchell or whatever. Maybe Dallas would get wild and put Kleber on Mitchell. And Kleber does defend a bunch of different types of players. But anyway, assuming they get by round one, now it's round two, and part of this is, of course, if they're going to hold on to the 1 seed. If they do, then they're probably going to get the winner of, at the moment, what looks like Nuggets-Lakers round one, which we would all pick to be the Lakers, even if LeBron is just out there and AD isn't. Given Murray's injury, yeah, I think the Lakers would win that series. So then you think about Frank Vogel's defense against the Jazz and locking in on Donovan Mitchell and double teams, switching more, all that. I just want to see how that would go. I mean, I'll tell you now, if LeBron just decided to lock in on Donovan Mitchell, I don't think the Jazz would be able to score a lot of points. But you can't just ask LeBron to do that all the time. So then it would be a matter of, to me, the Lakers probably switching all of Mitchell's stuff or bringing 2 defenders to him and then daring Gobert to make a play in the open court. And there's definitely counters there to get Mitchell still going, whether it's simply running in isolation or you can set a screen around half court or so and just get Mitchell going downhill to the basket like that. There's also slip screens, of course. You could also have Mitchell come up and then throw the ball to somebody else on the perimeter real quick, and at that point he's already got momentum, so he can just sprint off ball to the basket. The point being is, I think if the Lakers' defense is at the peak of what we've seen them be, I think Mitchell would have a tough time. Not to say that he would be bad, but he'd have to work for it, and I think it could even get to the point where you'd have to run maybe some more off-ball stuff than Mitchell would be super comfortable with to get him some open looks. The other thing there, too, is the Lakers, just the size and the help defense of AD around the basket, Drummond there as well. Even if Drummond's, yeah, I know, but still, he's big and he'd be around the rim. For a guy in Mitchell who at times has been a little too floater happy, how would that go? Now, if the Jazz get the Clippers in the second round, which would happen if they fall to number 2 and Phoenix overtakes them for the top spot, then I feel like the question is a little bit more about switching, because I just don't think the Clippers have the defensive chemistry and communication the Lakers do. Not to say they won't try to double team Mitchell, and then, at that point it becomes a 3-on-4 game, and you need to be able to react very quickly to who rotates where and all that. And the Lakers have proven they can do that. The Clippers will still have to see. But anyway, if Mitchell is just constantly having to deal with Paul George, Marcus Morris, Kawhi, Serge Ibaka, if he's switching on to him that much, and just having to drive by these big bodies all the time, can you simply get around him? I mean, again, he's 6'4". You look at all of the great players today, they're either tall or they're amazing from three. And given the amount of threes he's attempted this season, safe to say he would attempt quite a lot in the playoffs. Should mention the Suns as well, even if the odds are not as high on the Jazz and Suns facing each other unless both LA teams have been eliminated. But between Chris Paul, Mikal Bridges, Jay Crowder, and with how good the Suns' communication and rotation defense has been this whole season, and Ayton's improvement as well, I think they could definitely give Donovan Mitchell some problems and force him to go to his plan B or whatever. Now, the obvious thing you can say in benefit of Mitchell is he could go at DeAndre Ayton a lot. And again, Ayton has gotten better, but if you're just going at him possession after possession, can he handle that sort of thing? So we'll just see with Mitchell. To think about the Jazz in general, I mean, I've seen the idea of switching more against them, because it's probably the best way to just not give up as many open shots, given how spaced out the floor is for them. The one thing with that is eventually it comes down to a smaller guy being switched on to Gobert, or a bigger guy being switched on to somebody on the perimeter. And some teams have the bigs who can switch and others don't. Now, if it's a wing player on Gobert or whatever, are the Jazz going to throw it down to him at all, or are they not going to bother? I mean, I mentioned Dallas earlier. I think Dallas would be comfortable with Kleba switching on to Mitchell, Porzingis, maybe. If I go back to the Lakers, I think they would be totally fine with Davis switching on to Mitchell. Drummond or Harrell, probably not as much. The other thing that switching a lot would do is, besides just Mitchell and Gobert, is it really just kind of takes out the whole, or at least it attempts to, take out the whole we're better than the sum of our parts sort of thing that the Jazz have a little bit of going on. They're a talented roster, no doubt. But instead of it just being we're whipping the ball around, now it's, well, you're going to have to beat me one-on-one. It's like, well, can Mike Conley beat a bunch of guys in one-on-ones anymore? Probably not as much as the Jazz would really be comfortable with trying. Now, that said, it's not as if the Jazz are not going to see this coming, and it's not as if it hasn't happened this season already. So whether it's slip screens or whether it's Gobert just being at the top of the key with cutters around him or at the elbow with cutters around him, there's counters to these sorts of things. It's just Utah, they're just in the fascinating position because it's like they have to play Gobert. And he has clear limitations on offense, which I think gives teams a little bit more luxury than they would against like the Nuggets, right? Because if you switch everything against the Nuggets, you're just going to end up with some dude that Jokic is going to kill in the post. Can't say the same thing for Gobert. Now, do not mistake this as me saying Gobert is like not good. I mean, like I was all in on the, yeah, they overpaid him, but what else were they really going to do whole thing? What, they're just going to get off of Gobert and just become bad? Because, to clarify, if Gobert was not on this team, they would fall from currently 4th in defense to, 22nd or something. I think the other question is, when at times will the Jazz simplify their offense for the sake of attacking a mismatch? Because it can get tough to score in the playoffs, and you can do all your nice ball movement stuff and your pretty swing offense, but sometimes it's just, hey, that guy can't defend, let's go at him. And I just want to see, like, how often will they do that? How comfortable are they with doing that? Because I don't think they want that to be the foundation of their offense. So that's all I got. I can't wait for the playoffs, man. It's going to be really fun. We're getting to the point in the regular season where it's a bit of like, okay, a few more games, but we'll get there.